been a great weekend here in Salt Lake City. Beautiful weather. It's almost like summer out there. It gets a little bit cool at night, but just some beautiful days. Today was just gorgeous. It's going to be nice for the next couple of weeks. But depending on where you go in the country, it can definitely change. Fringe Radio is here every Saturday night from 6 till 10 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'd like to say good evening to all of our listeners that listen to us via the Inception Radio Network or the Listen Live link at k-talk.com or here on good old AM 630 in Salt Lake City. If you want to join the chat, a whole bunch out in the chat room at Inception Radio. Go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com. The gang's there, and if you've got questions, you can post your stuff through there. The Fringe Radio Show covers anything related to the paranormal, ufology, aliens and alien abduction, science and science fiction, cryptozoology, conspiracies of all kind, anything shrouded in just a little bit of mystery. You can find Fringe Radio on the World Wide Web at FringeRadioshow.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. If you have a story, a sighting, or questions for our guests, go to the contact page, send us an email, and we'll make sure that we get your questions posed to our guest. The call-in number up and down the Wasatch Front, southern Idaho, Davis and Weber counties, Utah County, and all the way down in the middle of the state, 801-254-5855. That's 801-254-KTKK. We've got two awesome guests tonight, but before we get going, I want to just take a moment. I guess you would call her a ufologist. She worked a lot in the field of alien abduction and abduction scenarios. Someone who's been in the field in general for a long time is Dolores. Our first guest is Sam Maranto. He is the state director for the Illinois MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and a longtime certified field engineer. He also was the state representative for the Disclosure Project. Sam's been involved in many, many major mass sightings, but the two that really stick out are Tinley Park and Rockford, and of course the O'Hare Airport UFO sighting. He's been on many different programs. He got into his research with the UFO phenomenon back in 1964. We actually had Sam on the show, believe it or not, 3 years ago. He hails from the south side of Chicago. And me, of course, being a Chicago native, I am more than happy to have Sam on. So without any further delay, let's get him on the line. Sam, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk and the Fringe Radio Show, my friend.
It's a pleasure to have me back on there, and I wish I had some of your weather.
Oh, I know. Well, when we were talking a little bit before the show, my mom, who lives literally right up the street from you over in Oak Forest, Illinois, on the south side, she was telling me today it's just rainy and cold, and you guys summer just never took off up there.
No, we had intermittent something is what it came down to. It's either uncomfortably snowy, and we had a lot of rain, these torrents of rain. I've never seen storms so concentrated and intense. Trees knocked down all over the place it was the 1st of July, and the evening prior, I was in Oak Lawn, and we were leaving a client's house, and my gosh, I couldn't believe the rain. And I told Julie, I says, we got to drive home now. And I was just very calm, couldn't believe I made it. Lights were out all over. And by the next day, a good thing we did get home because this area became an island and breeze all over.
Yeah, I've got a good friend, a longtime friend of mine, Chris, who I think is listening tonight. He lives over in the Burbank area. And several times this summer, not right where he lives, but a couple blocks east of him, right down there near 79th Street, he said it was just all those homes became islands. It just it flooded so many times. It just never seemed to let up.
Oh, there was flooding throughout the Oak Lawn, that Burbank area, Bridgeview, all that became just underwater. It was horrible.
Well, and the temperatures. Talking to some people back there, you just never saw summer. I know we've got some good friends that have a summer home up in the on the southwestern tip of Michigan, up in the Saugatuck Holland area, and said you could never go really swimming in Lake Michigan. It barely got warm enough to get your feet in.
That's true, and I think we're going to have a nasty winter ahead. Last winter, every single weekend in the winter, we were shoveling snow.
Yeah.
We didn't have a weekend. Our weekends were shoveling snow.
Yeah, yeah. Just absolutely crazy. Well, hopefully it won't be bad, but it's to see it in the 40s in the daytime at this time of the year. I mean, I can see in mid-November or whatever, but it's the weather patterns have just been crazy. But Sam, again, it's an honor to have you here. It's been 3 years ago we had you on the program. And of course, I'd like to talk about the Tinley Park lights, the triangles that some new listeners that have come on board maybe don't know about, in the O'Hare Airport thing. But what has been going on in the world of ufology in Illinois?
To tell you the truth, I haven't been all that active in the last year, working on a few other projects, but my investigators have been extremely busy. And I have 2 incredible investigators. I'm looking for more, so any people listening in the area, please give me a call or send me an email if you have an interest to be an investigator. Roger Lorella and Jim Wilford are 2 of the best investigators I've had in a long time. And they probably had in the last year 100 cases each.
Wow.
So very good cases. As you know, most of the cases we get are prosaic, and that's fine. We teach people to look at things far more objectively. And also we're trying to get more astronomers on board, amateur astronomers, certified astronomers, to teach people how to observe, also how to distinguish between prosaic objects. Many a time, being in so many flight paths, a plane will be coming at them at a distance, and all of a sudden it disappears because it turns, but they think it just had disappeared, and it hadn't. And, thinking it must be a UFO because it just disappeared. And all it is just an illumination in the sky. But, of course, there are those cases that stand out as being something truly unusual. And, of course, we're on the 10-year anniversary of the Halloween sighting of the Tinley Park lights.
Well, that is a perfect segue to go into that. Why don't you, because again, some of these are historic cases in ufology, and of course we're here in Salt Lake City, a lot of things happen out here, and we've actually had some very recent activity here, which has stirred up the media a little bit, and a lot of people have come forward with it. But why don't you give us a little bit of a background on the Tinley Park sightings and kind of the magnitude of that?
The Tinley Park sightings came actually right after a mass sighting in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, which was on the 19th of August. And that sighting was seen by tens of thousands of people, an object that stayed in the sky for approximately 9 hours. Later that evening, this would have been the 19th again of August 2004, an object was seen and recorded from 2 vantage points, possibly even more, in the Glendale area and the Phoenix area. And that object was very unusual. It was, as described by the person who I know that took footage of it, looked like a battleship in the sky, like the from Star Wars.
Oh yeah, like a cruiser, one of those big cruisers.
Yes,
right.
And it sat there perfectly still, and the illuminations are very unique. Unlike, say, for instance, conventional aircraft lighting, these illuminations are some sort of plasma. And in other words, when I say illuminations, yes, we see it as a light, but then knowing the spectrum of light. And it's a residual effect of energy. It isn't there for the purpose of lighting, illuminating, but it's a residual effect. And the same coloration, that orangish red and deep red, is what was seen here on the 21st of August, a few days later, in the sky in a triangular pattern, hovering over the Tinley Park area and throughout the country during that whole period of time. And this event went on for days. We actually had video recordings of 2 of these massive triangular objects seen in Melbourne, Australia. Just a matter of hours later, it was on the 23rd, I believe, and they're 16 hours ahead. But that was a great event, a mass sighting in Tinley Park, Illinois, south of, you know exactly where that's at, close to Mom, right?
Right.
And we had witnesses in Tinley Park, in Oak Forest. We had people saying the very same event in Sauk Village, Crete. This object moved throughout the area, and I think there were multiple objects. But that was the first event of a mass sighting that we call the Tinley Park sighting. But the one that becomes more intriguing is the one that took place on the Halloween evening, because it was at least 3 different types of objects were seen besides the massive triangular object. There was a horseshoe-shaped object with a boom, and the funny thing about that craft, and of course the large orange orbs, those 2 objects are relatively common to be seen with massive triangular isosceles objects. And in fact, David Marler had written a book, and I was able to add a little bit to it, on triangular objects, an estimate of a situation. And he's an interesting person to have on one of these.
We did. We actually had him and Grant Cameron on the same night.
Oh, 2 of my favorite people.
Yeah, it was a good night.
Yeah, Grant is such an interesting man. But this Tinley Park case, I'm still not done with it. Most cases I keep open until there's nothing more coming in. Same thing with the O'Hare case. We still get witnesses coming forward. But with Tinley Park, so much footage, very solid evidence to show that this is not a prosaic object, that this is something really unusual. And the funny thing about it is, we've also recently, within the last few years, discovered a set of footage from southern Illinois during that episode that took place on the 4th of January 2000. And that is an interesting case because there is a very unique characteristic in the footage where one of the illuminations does a complete arc and flips over. Well, it just so happens the same thing happened in Tinley Park. It was seen, people talk about it, and it's recorded. That very same flipping motion, which indicates this is a solid, there is a connection there in time-space between the 2 points of illumination. There's also some other characteristics of the one central apex illumination that shows a strong indication of something being solid.
Now, the Tinley Park case, and if people go out there and look at it, it's I didn't realize its significance and its size, if you will. Didn't a lot of people, wasn't there, and maybe I've got the timing wrong on this, Sam, but wasn't there a KISS concert or something going on at the big auditorium there? And for those listeners out here that don't know where Tinley Park is, it's about, I would say, 50 miles due south of Chicago, of the city. Used to be no man's land years ago when I grew up out in that area, and now it's the suburbs just keep rolling out and out. But it's a far southern suburb, and I believe there's a big, huge music auditorium out there. And wasn't there during the KISS concert? Wasn't there tons of people that saw those lights that same night during the concert?
It was Ozzy Osbourne Ozfest.
Oh, okay, sorry,
Yes.
Close enough.
Close enough. And boy, oh boy, people were pouring out into the thoroughfare, getting on I-80. And you know what's unique about this area? That it's called Midwest Center now, but that huge facility could be seen, from 40, 50 miles up from a satellite. And you could go on Google and see it. It's pretty pronounced. The other thing you'll notice is the interstate. And that interstate is one of the more illuminated interstates. Of course, Tinley Park is the most illuminated area south of the Loop, as you pointed out. This is not a small area. It is booming. Population is huge compared to lands just, a few miles south from there. So you have a high population. You have unique characteristics as far as geographic locations. And within that area, too, there is a subdivision that is made, that is patterned of a bunch of circles, sequential circles. And the funny thing, you look at it, it almost looks like a cyclotron. But you have all these interesting points. If something was flying over looking for unique characteristics in the geography or in the civilization itself, under the assumption this is extraterrestrial, then I can't see why not. The other thing is we have a slew of radio antennas along I-80, as you recall.
Right.
So, I mean, you have a high population, and both nights there were people out and about in the community. There's a lot of activity. The sky on the 21st of August was perfectly clear. Halloween, we had a storm coming in from the northeast. But these objects appeared and stayed within the vicinity for some period of time before they ventured off. So it wasn't that they just, briefly came in and shot off. They were there. And then we always cross-reference the other types of prosaic things that people want to, throw in there as being the explanation. Flares on balloons. That was Michael Shermer's favorite one. And no characteristic to a flare on a balloon. And we've had enough experiences with them. The other thing that's always a pain in our neck is the Chinese lanterns.
Right.
We have a lot of training how to discern what those things are. Plus the fact I get to retrieve a bunch of them on a regular basis. So we're used to those, and this was nothing like that.
These crafts in Tinley Park, Sam, that came in, did anybody get an opportunity? I guess a couple of things. Did anybody get a chance to look at any sort of radar images or radar reports? Because, of course, Tinley Park in Chicago, of course, there's the two big airports. There's O'Hare International up on the north side of the city. And then, of course, there's Midway Airfield down at about 63rd Street. And again, my mom being right there in that Tinley Park, Oak Forest area, of course, Southwest, I think, owns Midway Airport. That's all you see is Southwest jets coming in to the north. So that's a pretty high traffic pattern for commercial aircraft. Did anybody ever get a chance, did you or anybody get a chance to look at any sort of radar images from that time period?
On the 21st of August, there was absolutely no air traffic for approximately 2.5 hours. All those objects were in the vicinity. Now, you know what air traffic pattern looks like out here. And in the evening, you can look up in the sky, and you'll always see I was trying to figure out an average of number of planes at any given time, and I think that was 8. And during that time period, it may have been less, but not that much less. That really startled people when they initially seen these illuminations, because they thought there was some sort of terrorist activity going on. Some people really got spooked. Now, as far as radar data, we could not retrieve that data within the 15-day window because of the volume of reports I was working on, and I still had to take into consideration that this was possibly some type of hoax. I really came to the decision soon after that 15-day period that maybe I should have tried to get radar data. The FAA was contacted by media, by various groups, and they simply said that nothing did show up, and it wasn't anything prosaic they could have seen. Now, on the 31st of a Halloween sighting, I did file a FOIA within that window of time. That window passed, and I kept on following up every week to find out the status of my request. And it just so happens that supposedly, as I was told, it was faxed to Midway Airport, and the person who was in charge of handling that was out on maternity leave, and therefore expiring my window, and I couldn't follow up on it.
Interesting. When when you go to these different airports and stuff, Sam, when and again we'll get into the O'Hare story a little bit later, but are they pretty forthcoming on turning stuff over to you, or is it like pulling teeth?
It depends on the situation. I had actually called down to one of the FAA facilities pertaining to the sighting on the October sighting, and the individual there said, "Sam, if it's really a UFO, you're not going to get the data." Well, you get lucky sometimes, and NARCAP, the National Aviation Reporting Center for Anomalous Phenomena, which was the point people, Richard Haynes was the point man for the O'Hare case. He was able to drum up radar data, but it's very costly. People think, well, you just call and they just send it to you. Oh, no, it could cost thousands upon thousands of dollars. And that comes out of your pocket. And unless you have an organization to pop for it, and they have to be prodded sometimes to come up with the money for that if they have it. So NARCAP did do that for the O'Hare case, and they did have the radar data. Funny thing about radar, it doesn't really pick up anything unless it's moving.
Right.
There has to be some degree of motion. That object sat there over at gate seat 17 for maybe 20-some minutes, and it was relatively motionless, except it seemed to have been moving in a counterclockwise direction. And it sat there about 1,900 feet in the sky, maybe a little bit below, because the cloud ceiling was at 19, and it could have been 300 to 400 feet below that. But that object sat there motionless while hundreds of people observed it from various vantage points. And you would think we would have volumes of footage, volumes of photographs, and we don't. There was only a few photographs that came in that appeared to be possibly genuine. One went to above top secret, and I was able to get a hold of that image. Also, from that site, I was able to get a very key witness, and she's part of that report, 155-page report at the narcap.org website. And I recommend people, if you have an interest in aviation, UFO sightings, go to the narcap.org site and review some of the scientific and technical papers that they have.
Interesting. With the Tinley Park sighting, Sam, did anybody see these crafts come in? I mean, did they come in from the south, the east? Were they moving to the north? I know the couple YouTube videos that I watched, it's hard to tell there's actually some decent ones out there, but they're hard to tell because you don't know what orientation, you don't know if someone's looking up to the north, the south, the east, or the west. Was there any sort of a flight pattern when all these things were moving through, and where did they end up going to?
That's a good question, because the way they came in on various dates, they were a little different. And the large object seemed to be coming in from the south-southwest on 821, more from southeast-south on 10/31/2004. But then again, there was a multiplicity of objects, these horseshoe-type objects. And I have footage of these, and also did some enhancements back then. One of these years, I'll have all this stuff put together and make a nice book. But they took off, and they were seen all over the place. They were seen in Ohio. They were seen in Houston. They were seen on the East Coast, in British Columbia, in the Aegean Sea. Then again, of course, like I mentioned, down in Australia, in Melbourne. So this wasn't obviously flares on a balloon. It wasn't Chinese lanterns. They don't function like that. They don't have the characteristics. And the characteristics are things that you really have to be key to. Just because you see an illumination or a light in the sky doesn't mean it's an extraterrestrial object. Observe what it's doing. And you really want, and this was more than just lights. People were able to discern structure, characteristics. It just depends where you had your observation from. Further away from Tinley Park, where you were able to see some degree of enhancement of the lights below it hitting it, it seemed to absorb whatever structure or composite these things are made of. It seemed to absorb the light, but yet not enough where it wasn't able to give away some sort of silhouette, some sort of structure. And people were seeing edges. People were seeing what appeared to be some sort of star field, trying to mimic a star field below it as far as camouflaging and cloaking. The other thing is objects coming in and out of these massive objects, disc-shaped or smaller objects, some that are very unusual looking. And a gentleman called me from Wausau, Wisconsin, while he was watching the Tinley Park Lights episode, Invasion, Illinois, from when we did the UFO Hunters.
Right, right.
That was in season 2. I think it's series 201, Invasion, Illinois. Gentleman got my phone number, home number, called me up. He says, "Are you the guy on the television?" And I'm like, I didn't know if the show was on or not. I'm like, I don't know. What are you watching? And sure enough, he goes, I saw that craft up close and personal. I go, really? Now he really had my attention. This guy was one of these volunteer weather reporters, and he would go up on top of these fire towers up by Ribbit Mountain in Wausau, Wisconsin, and he would check on weather. Well, he was driving up there in his truck, and he noticed these huge 3 lights in the sky, but these lights were white, not red. And he got his truck up there. He was just in such a degree of shock. He goes, he left the door open, runs up to the tower, and as he's going up the tower to see what this is, it's directly over him. He's seeing undulating skin or texture underneath the object, and he could see that this is a solid object, but he's getting that distortion, and he described it like the undulation of an eel, the way an eel's skin undulates. So he's getting up there, and also while he's climbing up there, he's getting all these prickly, pinchy feelings, like strong static electricity throughout his body. Well, he gets to the top, and he's looking at this object, and he can see that it's one huge, massive object, just sitting there motionless, directly over the mountain. And beneath directly in back of one of these recessed illuminations, the white illuminations, he said there was a spot that opened up. It was a darker area, and an object came out of it. An object came out. It shot across the mountain, went over a road where a truck or a car was moving along, and instantaneously as it went over it, that car stopped, dead still, lights went off. It sat there for a bit and shot right off. He said it got off full speed, off to the horizon, and came back. Went back up into the that section that it came out of, and soon after this object took off. He also said there was a series, there was right in the middle, a very deep, dark, reddish area that it seemed to be a bunch of windows on the inside, but it was, and he said you could almost see structure or some sort of technology within there, and people or figures. So he saw this up close.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like Sam with the Phoenix lights. It's interesting. So many people photographed the lights. I remember seeing on the internet many years back, but those photos are now gone, and I've listened to some different interviews. People, during the Phoenix Lights event, saw superstructure It wasn't something transparent or something hazy or, like a Klingon cloaking device. I mean, there was superstructure there, and that seems to be a little bit more commonly reported. I know back here in 1998, I saw a craft just for a matter of seconds, but I saw superstructure. And you don't get many good pictures of that. You just tend to see the lights. But that's something that people that really get up close seem to see.
Yes, and I keep thinking of so many great cases with unusual structure. In fact, these things don't seem to be very aerodynamic in some instances. But these large, triangular, massive craft. One gentleman comes to mind. He was just getting out of the Navy in southern Illinois and gave a very good interview of his account. He lives in a small town and was driving into another town, a little bit larger. And while he was driving, he's seen these illuminations in the sky, and he's like, what on earth are these? And he gets closer, and this massive ship is directly over the town and just sitting there. And he was describing it in great detail. Again, seeing superstructure, unique aspects that nothing conventional has. And that's the other thing, is trying to describe or discern what function something is. And it's hard to do. What I tell people don't try to tell me what you think it is. Just describe it in the most basic yet detailed manner. In other words, color, angular structure, draw it, everything. But don't try to discern its purpose. Many times people say, well, there's exhaust fans on the back.
Right.
Or there's engines. Is it an engine, or it looks or it resembles it?
Right. Sam, I got to take a quick commercial break. Our guest tonight is Illinois MUFON Director Sam Maranto. He was on a few years back. We're honored to have him here. We're going to talk more about UFOs and let's get into a little bit of alien abduction maybe and what MUFON's doing. Of course, one of the biggest sightings, the O'Hare Airport UFO. K-Talk AM 630. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Sam. Stick around. We got a lot more to cover tonight. Welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Illinois MUFON Director Sam Maranto. Sam, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to be here with us.
Oh, it's my privilege. I look forward to it.
You hit on a good point, too, right before we went to the commercial, and maybe you could, out here in Utah, we went for a long time without really any MUFON representation, and now Erica Lucas, we've had her on the show. She's now the director for Utah, and trying to get things off the ground. Matter of fact, I'm helping her develop the new MUFON website for Utah. And try to contribute a little bit, but maybe you can tell some of our listeners, you've been doing this for so long, when somebody sees something unique in the air, and here in Utah, there have been a ton of sightings. I'm sure you follow up on stuff, Colorado, Idaho. We're having something occurring here, and it's happened a few times where they appear to be, if you want to call them meteorites, that are coming inbound, but in a couple of cases, and they've been caught on film and captured on video, these meteorites are these huge balls of white light are screaming across the sky, and it actually appears like something is firing something at them, and they've actually caught this on film. And these little white balls flying around in the air, way up in the air, but the sightings here in the past month have really been off the charts. The activity has been high. What do you tell our listeners when they see something, especially if they're going to report it to MUFON? What are some of the things that they should do?
One of the first things they should do, especially something that's moving quick, try to record it or have another witness. Have another witness observe it from their vantage point, even if it's just another set of eyes a foot away. Now, the perfect scenario, of course, is to have two people and then have one person call a person from a different vantage point. Let's say the direction that it appears to be going. Call them if they know somebody in that area and see if they're good enough to go out and and observe it. The best thing, of course, the perfect scenario, is to have good recording devices of the entire event. And that's rare. But strangely enough, today, if you are proficient with your cell phone, even a cell phone today can give you some pretty decent images. So anything is better than nothing.
Right.
The most important thing is pay attention to where you're at, the location, and observe it. Again, not trying to discern what it is, but the details of what it's comprised of, the characteristics, the motion, the coloration, the detail, as much detail as possible. Also be very aware of your surrounding. What is going on in your surrounding? Is it affecting your surrounding? Are there animals being affected? Are there disturbances or changes in air traffic? Is there all of a sudden more air traffic, and that air traffic potentially being military? If you're seeing more air traffic that's highly unusual, potentially following it, if you know any of the details about military planes, etc., then it would help. Otherwise, just observe, get the details. The rest of that can be panned out later. Time, location, direction, and the manner of your observation through glass. The best thing to do is get out of your car. Do not look through glass. Same thing with photographs. Do not take photographs through glass.
Too many reflections.
Oh gosh, how many photographs I've analyzed and just mainly reflection.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that. A question that one of our listeners sent in for you, Sam, and I was going to ask this one too, with the Tinley Park sightings, did the military, to your knowledge, or were there any military aircraft that were dispatched, or was everybody kind of just in a state of awe and looking more than doing things?
Well, the funny thing was, on 8/21, we had the Air and Water Show, so we had a myriad of aircraft actually earlier in the day in the area. What had happened after the sighting, or soon thereafter, military planes were seen in the area. I'm not sure if they were F-16s or whatever. We've had a couple instances of F-18s being sent out from further east, near the Rock Island area, after some events. But this was the Air and Water Show. We had over 3 million people out earlier that day, and to have absolutely no air traffic is sort of odd,
yeah.
you know. And so yes, in I believe both instances, spotter planes, military planes were seen in the area.
It is interesting. As many years, and you could shed a little bit of light on this, as many years as you've been researching this subject, it seems like there are military aircraft that have chased after these unidentified flying objects. Has there ever been any and maybe it's just not let out to the public, has there been any really good footage? Have you seen any really decent photos? Or is it just, trying to chase these things down to figure what they are, or maybe even stay with them in the event that they do something not so friendly, if you will?
I think today, we had that whole episode back in the 50s where these objects were actually pilots were told to engage them, to shoot them down. In fact, Frank Frascino, have you had him on your show?
Oh, yeah, a couple times.
Yes. Well, his book is very detailed. And we've had our instances out here. There's been a few instances back in the 50s where in the Rockford area where planes were taken down by so-called interlopers. And, I don't think it's in the best interest of a pilot to engage something that could basically outmaneuver it without any sort of effort, and quite possibly have either energy if it's not intentional, but something that can disturb its instrumentation or the mechanics of the plane itself if it isn't a direct threat. In other words, it could be an indirect threat. But I don't think it's too wise to engage them.
Is that still kind of the protocol, Sam? As if military jets encounter these things, is to fire at them?
I think in some places it still is. I don't think it's practiced much here. But then again, I have no knowledge of it.
Right.
From my own experience, from what I've seen and heard and spoke to people, they engaged them. And they engaged them up until the 70s. I know that for a fact. And with some, with some very dangerous results, where pilots were lost, planes went down. Some instances, planes never recovered because it has disappeared.
Right.
So I had a very good witness. I don't know if I'll ever bring forward his whole story, but he worked at 2 locations where this had happened. And in one location, near the Michigan area, they would have regular occurrences of these objects, moving in with impunity on restricted airspace. And they would pursue them. They'd send them up. But they did engage them a few times, and it was with frightening results. So I don't think it's a wise thing to do, but I guess today our technology may be substantially better that we could engage them if we wanted to, and that may be the case in point when we're talking about these objects that are recently being seen in your area, and same thing over here. These may very well be, who knows, UFOs that are being attacked, shot down. This happens. We had an instance in 2010 of something that flew in, and from what I've seen, it looks like a missile was shot at it, and whatever that object was, it did go down further west from the Batavia area, I would say around Sandwich, Illinois. And from what I heard, that area was cordoned off and restricted for a while, and the military came in, and whatever it was carted off. I didn't have time to get out there. So these things happen. And, it doesn't happen every day, but I think the occurrences are getting higher. Now, some of these objects that are being seen, what we aren't being told much about is these near-Earth objects, and a lot of debris is coming in. So is this some of the objects that are being seen? Quite possibly. That in itself is pretty threatening.
Right.
And then we hear about UFOs engaging or quite possibly destroying meteorites that are coming in that would be a threat. There was a case in Turkey. There was a few other that I've heard about. And so you have to think, well, are they looking out for us, whatever they are, or are they us? With our technology, it is basically kept at bay from the general public. And I think there's a good portion of that, too.
Where do you think, Sam, ufology? I actually had the opportunity to be on another program some couple of months ago, and I'm not a ufologist like yourself. I am kind of a researcher. I've been doing this show into our 4th year of doing this, and it's to continually bring people on and people like yourselves, experts like yourselves, and talk about these different things. And people are starting to open up, more and more. Not that many years ago, the general public didn't talk about this type of stuff. They just didn't do it. And now people are starting to come forward. Do you think, as far as sightings and what have you goes, do you think it's kind of slowed down a little bit? Or, like we of course, we've had several different instances over the past 50, 60 years, Roswell, well, more than 50 or 60 years, so Roswell, Kecksburg, so many different things, and now we don't hear about that. Do you believe, a couple questions maybe to pose to you, is do you believe that there are crashes? Do you believe that that still does happen? But maybe these containment teams are quicker on the draw and able to clean things up. What's your thoughts on the whole field of ufology? It seems like it's stalled out a little bit, but now the sightings are starting to come back again. Where do you think we are in the cycle?
Well, the funny thing is, where do people call? Now, MUFON, very few people know MUFON. They're learning it more if they have an interest in the subject. Of course, by watching Angle 1 or any of the episodes of UFO, pretty much any UFO-related show, MUFON always will come in, somebody from MUFON will be involved, usually. But not everybody knows that if you don't have an interest in it. So where do they call? They generally call the police department. And the funny thing is, they'll call the news agencies, the police department, weather centers, and, of course, their local observatory, planetarium, whatever. And sadly enough, those calls fall on deaf ears, or they have a prosaic explanation right off the bat, or you're just crazy. Now, for those people who do make the calls or have an interest or see something, they need to call MUFON. They need to go online. They need to call in, or call Peter Davenport, or call both. Just do it. Do it, fill out the report, and it's done. And then it can be followed up on. But another question you had was, is the frequency just diminishing? I don't think so. What happens is, I think we're in a very linear reality where we look just straight ahead instead of looking up, paying attention to our cell phones and our text pads, etc. And that is a huge problem. The other problem is that we are so inundated with technology that the normal assumption is that it's just something military or high-tech or some sort of laser display, something out of hand, because we're so inundated with these new features of technology and everything else. So I think, and I say it's more for men. Men love to use, that's got to be ours, it's some stealth technology. More so than women will say, wow, that is kind of odd. And they'll venture it. They'll be more daring. And I always say it's the male thing. It's more testosterone driven to suggest that right off the bat, out of hand, that it's some stealth technology or something else, instead of evaluating what it is you're observing.
Gotcha. It's again, it's such an interesting field. It has so much interest, and I think it's kind of it gained popularity in the 80s, and people had interest, and I know for people like you, it's always been there. I mean, it's your life. You spend and dedicate so much time of your life trying to find answers for people, trying to put the puzzle together.